You want to get nuts? Come on, let's get nuts. What's happening? What's happening? What's happening? Welcome into JC's Pop Culture, where we're discussing movie reviews, all things pop culture. You name it, we can discuss it here. And as always, of course, want to welcome in JR, who you guys may know from the Two Dudes Review Show. We've done a little audio only podcast, and we're going to throw this up on that feed as well here. But on JC's Pop Culture, want to feature him as well prevalently, excuse me, if I could talk right. As we've been reviewing movies together here for the past couple of years now, and wanted to branch out to the video side here with the JC's Pop Culture channel. So going to feature JR prevalently as well. So if you know Two Dudes Review, you probably know JC and JR. So you'll see JR here on the screen with me. And if you're coming over from the Country Roads webcast, which is the West Virginia channel I run as well, really appreciate you hopping over from there. I know on the CRW podcast, I'm always talking about movies and TV shows in off-topic babble, and this just kind of gives me more of a home to be able to discuss that kind of stuff directly, discuss movie news, movie reviews, video game news. Going to have plenty of those things coming out here in the near future on the channel. Definitely want to talk a little bit about the upcoming James Gunn DCU, but before we do that, we got to kind of close out the Zack Snyder DCEU. And that's something that I know me and JR have both been big fans of. Of course, as you see prevalently there behind me, I'm a huge Superman fan. We're both big-time DC fans. Zack Snyder's Justice League, to me, is a masterpiece that will never be touched, the greatest comic book movie of all time. But having said that, JR, we're going to discuss The Flash today. I think a long-awaited DC film that kind of puts a cap on the DCEU and provides a transition into James Gunn's DCU. So we're going to be reviewing The Flash here today on JC's Pop Culture. First video, been waiting, wanted to put this one up as the first video here on JC's Pop Culture, but also was very happy and elated that my buddy here, JR, was able to join. So that being said, JR, what are kind of your thoughts, I guess, on the DCEU, kind of recapping, and how you been doing, man? Glad to see you on here and getting you on JC's Pop Culture, JR, here, and, kind of continuing the Two Dudes Review on the audio side as well, I guess, and continuing our love of superhero films, most importantly.
Well, I've been chilling through. You see, that's a clusterfuck. Started off good, but god damn, that ain't clusterfuck the shit out there. But I mean, if this is the last movie, they did it justice, I guess. They ended well, but majority of the movies is, I don't know. Just like the first Justice League, not Zack Snyder's, but Joss Whedon's or whatever. Straight bullshit.
Oh God, don't even get me started, man. I just try and act like it don't exist.
Yeah, me too. But lucky for us, it does, right?
Unfortunately. But, I put a lot of that on Warner Brothers, and that's why you've seen, the changing of hands. Now David Zaslav moving in, the merger with Discovery. The Max app is dope as shit. A lot of the great content they've added on there, and I think they couldn't have picked a better head of the, new DCU. And finally, they're, kind of doing its own separate thing. Marvel had Marvel Studios. Now they got the DC Films division and starting the DCU with James Gunn and Peter Safran as the heads, which is awesome. Both guys with backgrounds with trauma, which, of course, being a horror fan is something that I love, and a fan of independent indie film, something I love as well. But I think that they're finally, hopefully, learning, from their mistakes and going to let their filmmakers have creative control here in the new DCU. We'll see what happens with that, because I think we can definitely attest that in the past, what fucked everything up, of course, was Warner Brothers wanting to meddle. They fucked up BVS. You can see that by the Ultimate Edition. Shits on the theatrical version they tried to fuck with. And then, like you said, Justice League, the Joss Whedon version, the abomination that it is. And then, of course, as I mentioned earlier, Zack Snyder's Justice League, which we finally got to see. I was so thankful for after years of clamoring for it. finally got to see the masterpiece that was. So hopefully they've learned from their lesson and they're going to let James Gunn do his thing and, the filmmakers that he hired do his thing. And I'm super excited about Superman Legacy and the news, coming along with that. But we'll put out a video specifically talking about the cast of Superman Legacy. Let's dive in a little bit on the Flash. Let's talk a little bit about the Flash, man. I know you finally got a chance to see it. I've seen it and looking to see it again soon. We're putting our video out. Of course, we're a little bit late to the party, but better late than never, I guess, as they say. Going to be coming to streaming in less than a week now. I think it's coming, VOD July 18th. So if you haven't got a chance to check it out in theaters, I know it didn't do the great, have the best run monetarily. A lot of that is because of controversy with Ezra Miller. Everything involved there. A lot of people are boycotting it because of them and everything that's happened there. But be that as it may, we're here to discuss the film with everything, that may be tied to it politically off to the side. Just going to talk about the film in general. Something that I was a fan of, and I think you were too, JR. So let's dive in on The Flash 2023, directed by Andy Muschietti. The screenplay credit goes to Christina Hodson, who also got the screenplay credit on Birds of Prey in the past for DC. But I believe that this film went through a ton of arbitration as to see who was going to be the final, credited writer there. I think that there was something upwards of 50 plus writers. It may have been even 70, something that I heard. There was at least 40 to 50 writers that, had their hands on this script throughout the years. It's been in development hell for the better part of a decade. Robert Zemeckis was attached. And of course, that's kind of funny with the Back to the Future references you get throughout the film. And we'll get into more of those as we continue throughout. But what we do know is directed by Andy Muschietti, who, of course, now we know has been tapped by James Gunn to direct the Batman movie for the DCU. The Batman Brave and the Bold movie also going to be directed by Andy Muschietti, who directed this film. And then Ezra Miller playing the lead in this movie, a dual role, really, essentially, as you'll see going throughout the film if you saw this. And this will be a spoiler review. I guess I should go ahead and say that now. We're going to dissect this movie kind of piece by piece. So if you haven't seen this yet, you probably don't want to watch this review, but if you don't give a shit about spoilers, then maybe you still don't. We'll continue and watch it here. But either way, we're going to dissect it and dive in on it. So Ezra Miller playing Barry Miller. Ezra Miller playing Barry Miller. Shit. Barry fucking Miller. Who the fuck is that? Ezra Miller. Ezra Miller playing Barry Allen, of course, both our present day incarnation and the 2013 version of Barry Allen, which we'll come to find here throughout the time travel plot of this film, kind of starring as one of the main roles there. Then you get Sasha Cale as Supergirl in the film, Michael Shannon returning as General Zod, Ron Livingston taking over for Billy Crudup as the father of Barry Allen, Kiersey Clemens back as Iris West, and of course, the great return, the one that I think I was most excited about this film for. A lot of people were most excited about this film for, the one and only, the Batman, JR. Michael Keaton returning as Bruce Wayne / Batman.
Christian Bale is the
Batman. Hey, whatever you say, man. Whatever you say, brother. Having said that, any thoughts on Andy Muschietti directing, this movie, and then also, of course, now being tapped to direct Batman Brave and the Bold?
Damn, I just hope the CGI is better on that.
Yeah. We'll get into it. But all right, let's kick it off. Here. Let's dive in on the Flash. Starting it off plot wise, we open up with Barry on his way, to a coffee shop. Of course, got to fill up. We know how the Flash has to have that calorie intake, and always constantly needing to eat or drink. So, giving his order to, I guess, a new guy at the coffee shop. And while he's waiting on the new guy who's kind of talking his head off, he gets the call from Jeremy Irons, Alfred, who I was happy to see the return of course, the DCU Alfred, basically needing to come help in Gotham. And Bruce is like, is no one else available? And Jeremy Irons kind of gives the rundown of other Justice League members, what they're up to at the time while they can't tap in and help. So while it's all up to Barry, and Barry kind of talks a little bit about how he feels like he's the janitor of the Justice League and shit like that. But anyways, he, of course, goes into the Speed Force, and while the guy's making his order at the coffee shop, goes over to Gotham to help Bruce Wayne, Ben Affleck's Bruce Wayne, of course. And we find out that it's Falcone's son, Carmine Falcone's son, has an agent that could wipe out all of Gotham, and that's kind of who they're after. And you get our first kind of action set piece with Batman and the Flash there, and you get Batman in the gray and blue suit from the comics. How about that shit, man? That's what I was most excited about when I saw this shit pop off. Was we've always talked about Batman in the blue and gray, comic book fans, etc. I've always wanted to see that and finally see it on screen. So, what'd you think? How'd it look?
I thought it looked good.
And then from
Well,
there, that's when we move to the kind of the first sequence where the CGI kind of sticks out a little bit, and that's when you get the collapsing
baby,
wing of the hospital, the baby's falling out a little bit, and I've heard it termed baby shower, which I never thought of it that in the past. That kind of made me laugh because it's a
yeah,
literal baby shower. They're falling
yeah.
out of the sky, you know.
He put
But
one. He put one in the fucking microwave. What the fuck?
yeah, yeah, that's what I'm saying. So like to involve the babies and shit was kind of weird, but all in all, I thought it was a pretty comedic sequence, especially. But this is the first time, like I said, where the CGI kind of sticks out. The babies look unreal, and I think to Andy
It
Muschietti's
looks,
credit,
it looks like
whether
goddamn fucking baby dolls.
yeah, that's what I said. It hits that uncanny valley for sure. And whether, to Andy Muschietti's credit, whether he's just trying to defend the effects department, the CGI creators or whatever, he said that it was intentional that it looked that way so that it would show a difference from when they're in the Speed Force versus when they're in real life. And I think, in theory, that was probably his intention to, have this look a little bit different in the Speed Force versus real life. I think that the CGI is definitely a tad bit spotty. Obviously, they're not going to use real babies in that sequence, but I think as big of a budget as this movie has, it could be cleaned up a little bit. So I understand the CGI complaints with this movie, and to me, that was the first sequence where it kind of stuck out. But all in all, a comedic sequence ends with the mother, or not the nurse, excuse me, screaming at the end, and you get kind of a RoboCop callback with Ezra Miller, the Flash, kind of saying, you should seek counseling, seek mental help. You've had a traumatic incident occur, and I thought that was pretty funny. And so then the Flash saves the babies. Everything's good with that situation. But while that's developing, you still got the chemical agent that could wipe out all of Gotham being pulled away by Falcone. Batman chasing them, which, Batman gets his awesome action sequence, which we've seen Affleck do a ton of those throughout the DCU and get another one here. And just as it seems like all hope is lost, that chemical agent's going to hit the water. Alfred tells us beforehand if it does hit the water, it'll wipe out all of Gotham. It's heading to the water. Looks like all hope is lost for
Yeah, Wonder
Barry
Woman.
and for Bruce, and then you hit that awesome fucking Wonder Woman theme that that Brett
Yeah,
came in first in
yeah,
BVS. That theme's awesome when she jumps in and she saves the day with her lasso of truth, and you get a good comedic sequence with the lasso wrapped around Barry
very.
and the criminals. I mean, not Barry, but Bruce and the criminals, I guess.
Yeah, and then Barry comes in and says something. He said, I thought we was just telling one truth or something. And he's like, oh,
Yeah.
he's
Oh no,
like,
yeah, because then then Barry helps tries to help get the lasso off of Bruce, and
yeah,
when it's on Barry, that's when the Flash is like, I understand what sex is, but I've never experienced it. And of course, that's kind of in a way the swan song of getting to see some of these DCEU characters together. Probably the last time, of course, we'll see all three of Zack Snyder's Batman, Wonder Woman, and the Flash together on screen right there. It remains to be seen if there will be a new Wonder Woman in the James Gunn DCU or not, but certainly appears like there will definitely be a new Batman and new Flash. So definitely maybe the last time we'll get to see those on screen, and I thought it was a really well done scene.
yeah, most definitely.
But even though it kind of felt like the swan song for those Snyder characters for me, it also kind of, and I'm sure we'll talk a little bit more about, like, I guess our positives and negatives, how we felt about the movie a little bit, more towards the end when we give our rating. But to me, is one of the things that stuck out like a sore thumb was seeing the Snyder characters interact in a more comedic tone and, with the brighter color palette, I guess you could say. It kind of felt a little bit off as well. Even though I did laugh, it still felt a little bit awkward even at times with Ben Affleck's Batman on the screen. As good as the action sequences were, and I thought shout out to Andy Muschietti and how he filmed a lot of the action scenes in this movie in general. Just having the Snyder characters on the screen with this brighter color palette. more comedic tone, all that just felt a little bit off at times for me. I don't know. What did you think?
Yeah. I told you I thought the movie started out corny.
Well, I'm not going to disagree because in general, when I was in the theater, I'd say the first 10 to 15 minutes, I was like,
Really?
I don't know if I'm vibing with this movie. But then about, I guess, midway through or so, it really picked up and I really liked it from there. So I guess I'm right there with you. The first, this action set piece was good. I thought, despite how I kind of thought it felt a little bit off with the Snyder characters, like I said, in the brighter tone, more comedic tone. Um, Before that, I was really not in the movie, but following this action piece and everything that follows from there, that's kind of when I really started to get into the movie. So from
Yeah.
there, of course, like I said, it's kind of the swan song for the Snyder characters. We get the flashback of Barry going to his childhood home, just to kind of visualize it for us to, as the audience, as he talks about it. And we see some memories, from his childhood and things like that. And following that, I guess, kind of the emotion of that, he learns that he can travel back in time. He travels back, a few seconds in time there, and then goes to talk to Ben Affleck's Bruce Wayne. And I thought this was a very well done scene. And I thought Ben Affleck gave a great performance in this movie in general when he was on screen, as he has for most of his time as Bruce Wayne slash Batman. But I really liked kind of the messages they were sending here, and with kind of the two characters relating to one another, both having, been characters that have dealt with the loss of their parents and that kind of shaping them into who they are.
Yeah.
And Bruce Wayne telling him, because it's kind of Barry Allen realizing that he's come to the realization, maybe I can go back
Yeah.
in time, maybe I can change things. And he goes to, who Bruce Wayne, who he really respects a lot, who really helped him, get his start, gave him, the first, Flash suit, and been there since the beginning, which we've seen through, the development of Zack Snyder's DCEU, and kind
Yeah.
of going to him and talking to him and saying, should I do this? Should I go back, try and save my mom? And you get, the great emotional connection between the two, and Ben Affleck's Bruce Wayne explaining, no, you shouldn't go back and try and change things because not only do you not know what it'll affect, but also the past and the things that you've gone through is kind of what makes you who you are. Movie's got a movie, and so we know he's a dumbass is going to do it anyway, of course, because kind of in our skewed, I guess, retelling of the Flashpoint paradox, I guess you could call it, with how they've set up this movie. He's going to go back, but he feels like if he doesn't, you know,
Talk to himself.
interact with any other, himself interact with his mother as far as influencing the murder one way or another, his mother being killed, he thinks everything will be okay following that conversation with Bruce Wayne. So what he decides to do to go back and change things is what this movie's
Tomato.
plot kind of boils down to. The MacGuffin of this movie is a
Yeah.
can of fucking
Tomato.
tomatoes.
What the fuck?
The one thing I'll give credit to this movie, albeit all the screenwriters that it went through, whoever you want to give credit to it for in the end, or Andy Muschietti, whoever, is that this movie tried to be a little bit different because we knew that it would kind of play on the Flashpoint paradox a little bit, which we knew that meant trying to prevent the death of his mother. And so I guess to kind of play with our expectations a little bit, they don't, go directly to that event, but something that could have prevented that event from ever happening. And
Yeah.
so
Yeah.
what this movie posits is that if young Barry doesn't forget to pick up the can of tomatoes while at the grocery store, then his dad never has to return to the store, pick up said can of tomatoes. He's there at the home. The intruder never comes in and kills Barry's mom. So ultimately, when he decides to go back in time, rather than interact with that situation, it's more so interacting by putting the can of tomatoes into the cart so it's not forgotten, and that changes everything, to the effect that we have moving forward. But to that, I'll say, something that I've heard since we're putting this review out at a later date, we have the luxury of watching previous reviews and things being brought to our attention that we maybe didn't, think about on initial watch of this movie. And it's certainly something that I didn't think about until I watched previous reviews. But how do you feel about this movie? Not really talking about Nora Allen's murderer, Barry
I
doesn't
swear to
care
God,
to solve who it
never.
is. It
Why
doesn't
would
address it. It doesn't bring it. It never brought up.
That's why I said I was about to ask you. If you think about it, they never told us who killed her. Like, was it just a random motherfucker? Was it
It's
George
it's
Flash?
it's never addressed. And I think the one thing I've heard, called excuse or whatever, is that Andy Muschietti said, of course, in the sequel they were going to bring in Eobard Thawne, bring in Reverse Flash, and that was going to be a big part of it. So maybe that's why they chose not to address it for this movie. But I think it certainly leaves a bit of a plot hole when you're picking this movie apart piece by piece. Why
Yeah,
would he not care who killed his mom? Why would his dad not care who killed his mom? Why would that not be,
yeah.
at least brought up in the movie, somewhat mentioned?
The only thing he
Yeah,
mentioned
never
was
brought up.
the only thing he mentioned about was that case he was working on. Yeah, he wanted to be right, but it wasn't. You know what I'm saying?
All right, so Barry, realizing that maybe interacting with a can of tomatoes and not any human specifically, maybe his way to go back in time and then not change too much,
Right,
drops the
card.
can of tomatoes in the grocery cart, heads back through the Speed Force, heading back towards the present. Um, and before we get into what happens next, JR, I want to ask you, how do you feel about how the Speed Force is kind of represented in this movie? I really thought it was a cool idea. We talked a little bit about the spotty CGI in this movie, so I think that kind of tampers it maybe slightly. But I love the idea. I think that the way they've termed it was like a coliseum of memories. That's how I've heard it termed, and I really love
Confused the
terming it
fuck
that
out.
way because he's in the middle and it's almost like a coliseum around him, and he's running through, and you see the moments in
A lot
time
of
kind of
memory.
past him as if he can select one. And instead of the cosmic treadmill, him running on, he's running in this kind of bubble, which Andy Muschietti, I think, has termed the chrono ball. And that's kind of what replaces the cosmic treadmill. But what do you think about how they kind of portray the speed force, that Coliseum of memories, the chrono ball kind of replacing the cosmic treadmill, as we see, Barry Allen travel through the speed force here, trying to get back to the present after, dropping that can of tomatoes in his mom's cart and hoping that works and keeps her alive in the future.
I think the way he runs is corny too.
Well, of course, and they kind of touch on that a little bit later once the powers get flipped and we see
Yeah.
Barry running without the effects. Having said that, he's in the chrono ball, running through, trying to get back to the present. All of a sudden, we see something stand up in what I termed the Coliseum of Memories. There, dark entity, no idea what it is, but enters into the chrono ball. So obviously moving within the speed force, moving the same speed as Flash, hits him, knocks him out of the chrono ball into a moment in time. At the time, we don't know where it is, but what Barry realizes is that his plan worked because his mother is alive. I believe he may think he's in present day. Either way, the sight of his mom, just kind of draws him in. Goes into the house, gets a chance to sit down and eat dinner with his mom and dad, and having that opportunity, something that he never got a chance to do, throughout his teenage years, and being an older version of Barry Allen, he doesn't consider the fact that wherever he may be in time, there's actually a present day
Very
version of Barry Allen in that time. And of course, we come to realize we're stuck in 2013. And Barry realizes this when he sees the 2013 version of Barry Allen approaching, coming home from college for his parents to do his laundry, spend some time with him. He's got the long hair. Barry, of course, our present day version of Barry spots him before the family does, and you get a good joke in the movie. I thought he says, "Oh shit," when he sees the
yeah.
2013 version of
Usually you
Barry,
gotta
and the
say
parents
shit.
kind of look at him funny. He says, "Oh, I got a shit, I got a shit." And I thought that was good. I thought that was well played. So this is when we get the first interaction of course, Ezra Miller playing the dual role of our present day Barry and the 2013 version of Barry Allen. And the 2013 version of Barry Allen is a more comedic version. And I've heard, of course, in some other reviews, people complain about the 2013 version of Barry Allen, specifically the laugh. So before we get into the plot specifically and move forward, as we're now at that point where this character comes in, what were your thoughts on the 2013 version of Barry Allen, JR?
I thought it was way cooler than the fucking regular one. He was a lot goofier, but no, I didn't like that. I didn't like the present day one though at all. I mean, in our timeline, the one from 2013 was cool.
Yeah, I kind of figured that you would like the 2013 version more because he's certainly a lot funnier. And I think what we're led to believe is that this 2013 Barry, of course, he's younger than the present day incarnation of Barry that we know. He's only 18 and a little bit more fish out of water, I guess you could say, throughout this movie. Um, and a lot of the comedy comes from, things he experiences. So I certainly understand you being a fan of the 2013 Barry as much as you love comedy. And he definitely
Yeah,
provides kind of the comedic relief in this movie, I thought. And then, of course, not long after they meet, the present day version of Barry realizes that it's the day that he actually got his powers, the day that he was there at Star Labs, got struck by the lightning with the chemicals in front of him, and of course, is what granted him his flash powers, and wants to make sure that the 2013 version of Barry gets those powers because he feels like if he doesn't, then that may affect him, and he may not have the powers once he returns to present day. Of course, as we are stuck in this time travel scenario, a lot of different things at play, and understandable why he would feel that way. So, upon realizing that, our present day Barry decides to kind of recreate the situation that gave him his powers back at Star Labs for 2013 Barry. Upon doing so, setting up the scenario, once the lightning strike comes in, it actually does grant 2013 Barry the powers. However, it appears to transfer them from our present day Barry, leaving our original Barry Allen from this movie powerless, while the 2013 version does have the powers of the Flash. So he, of course, is experimenting with those, really excited to have those, and it's a brand new thing for him. While we get the present day version powerless, attempting to be kind of the guide for the 2013 version.
that's cool. That's why I started fucking with the movie heavy because whenever he gave him the ring and shit.
Yeah, that was a pretty cool scene too. Teaches him about the flash ring. Love the incorporation
Yeah,
of the flash ring. Wanted to see that in live action for some time, and I thought they did a really good job of it. Of course, the suit popping out of the ring. Us fans of comics have seen it a million times, and of course, with his speed, be able to jump into it before it even hits the ground. Really awesome stuff there, and I thought they visualized that well. As bad as the CGI was in this movie, and it's one of the biggest complaints. There are some bright moments and some really cool moments in the script that they did. I thought that that was one. So upon this realization that present day Barry doesn't have his powers, of course, we talked about the comedic scene of him trying to start running and not having the powers a little bit earlier. Then he realizes this is also, unfortunately, the same exact day that General Zod invaded Earth. And we get to see kind of a recreation of the events of Man of Steel, which, of course, in my opinion, one of the greatest comic book movies of all time. Maybe we'll get a chance to do a review of that here on the channel on JC's Pop Culture in the future. Huge fan of that movie, changed my life personally. Big
yeah, you get
fan,
off of that movie.
and that's an understatement. Absolutely. So to get to go back to the events of that movie, I thought was pretty cool. But also, I kind of felt like, are we going back to the well one too many times? Because I thought when we did it versus, for BVS, and we're like, okay, Bruce Wayne was there for the events of Man of Steel. I was like, oh,
Now,
that's awesome. But then also Barry Allen was there too.
you're like, what the fuck? You only
I
save the
don't
kid,
know,
not the
man.
dad.
Yeah, I don't know. I think you might have went back. It's a bit of a hat on hat for me. You went back to the well maybe one too many times on that shit. I don't know.
Definitely.
But anyways, you get the flashback. You learn that Barry Allen apparently was there too. Not only was it just Bruce Wayne, and of course Clark Kent there the day that General Zod invaded back in 2013. So a decade prior to the events of this movie, and we're in that timeline right now. But what Barry comes to learn is that with the changes that he's made, there are no metahumans to help them. So it's up to Barry and 2013 Barry, or so they believe, as they go talk to some of 2013 Barry's friends. They come to find out, although there is no metahumans in this
There's a
universe, no
Batman.
superheroes, there is indeed a Batman. They all know of the Batman, of course. And the Batman does exist in this current timeline that we're in, the 2013 Barry's timeline, and I thought one of the best jokes within that conversation was the Back to the Future jokes. And did you get this, Jr. The Eric
Yeah.
Stoltz joke? Did you get it?
No, I don't know who that is. But I know that Michael J. Fox
Okay.
wasn't here.
Yeah. So okay. Back to the Future originally, when they were filming Back to the Future to start off, Eric Stoltz was cast as Marty McFly, and they filmed for nearly a month, at least 2 weeks on the movie with Eric Stoltz as Marty McFly, and they just kept watching dailies and realizing, Eric Stoltz is more of a dramatic actor. He's not fitting the movie, and so after 2 weeks to a month, they fired Eric Stoltz. You're not the guy. You're not Marty McFly. Michael J. Fox comes in. The rest is history. Back to the Future as we know it. So I thought it was pretty funny in this timeline. If you're a cinema fan, if you're a movie fanatic like you fuckers are that are probably watching us here on JC's Pop Culture, that it was pretty cool. It's something that you would know, the Eric Stoltz Back to the Future history, and that they kind of touched on that. And so not only did they honor, DC film history and superhero film history, I thought later on in the movie, I thought they honored film history and unmade movies in general with the Eric Stoltz references, and kind of had a little bit of a nod to Cinema Files right there, Jr.
Yeah. Now I know who it was. Never heard of him.
Yeah, that makes it even more fun.
Yeah, now that you said that, yeah, now that I know.
It pays it off even better. That motherfucker. God, what was his name? I can't remember the name of the guy. The long-haired friend on the couch had the tattoo of Eric Stoltz on his calf.
Yeah, on the calf, yeah.
As Marty McFly.
I forgot what he told him when he first walked in.
And it was pretty cool because that was kind of a nod to Cinema Files, that piece of movie history of Eric Stoltz, being Marty McFly in the past. But then also they played with, classic stuff from there. It was like Kevin Bacon wasn't in Footloose. It was somebody else. Kevin Bacon was in Star Wars or some shit, so whatever they was talking about that, in the 2013 Barry's timeline. That shit was funny. So they find out that only Batman exists in 2013 Barry's universe, the universe that, of course, our present Barry is currently stuck in. And so they go to Wayne Manor, as our Barry does know that the secret identity of Batman is, of course, Bruce Wayne, so he knows where to find him. We'll pull up to Wayne Manor. We see it's a little bit more decrepit, maybe not the Wayne Manor that our present day Barry was expecting to see. Enter Wayne Manor, and we see that it appears to be abandoned, a lot of empty rooms. But this right here is where I've got to credit the set decorators, the design team for this movie, the fans of Michael Keaton Batman, the Batman 89, Batman Returns. This Wayne Manor is fucking spot on to what we saw back in the day. I mean, you get to walk through, you go through the little armor room where Knox made the comments about Bruce Wayne in the 89 movie. You go through the dining room where him and Vicky Vale had the dinner. And then, of course, winding up in the kitchen where we find a long-haired Bruce Wayne cooking spaghetti and continues to kick the ass of the two Barrys. Of course, the 2013 Barry, newly gifted with powers, has enough speed to kind of dodge, whereas our present day Barry, with no longer having having powers, has to kind of just get his ass kicked by Michael Keaton's Batman.
Wow.
So, yeah, it was awesome. And me, was someone who, was born in the early 90s, grew up watching the 89 Batman on VHS and Batman Returns on VHS. Huge fan of Keaton's Batman. Never, of course, thought I would get the chance to see that incarnation of Batman on the big screen. It was pretty fucking surreal sitting in a theater and getting to see that come back, of course, especially later on once he puts on the suit. But even right now, with his intro, with the long hair, looking a little bit different, with, of course, Alfred not being around anymore, him just kind of doing his own thing. And they drop the line of, he's done such a great job that Gotham in this universe doesn't even need a Batman. It's pretty much a utopia, a perfect city without crime because of the job that he did. I thought that was a pretty cool angle. And, of course, honoring Michael Gough, the Alfred from that original Batman trilogy. Back in the 90s and 2000s. He passed away, so of course they weren't going to have him return, but honoring him as to show that there's no Alfred there for this Bruce Wayne. But great recreation of the Wayne Manor from those 80s and 90s Batman movies. And then, of course, you get Michael Keaton back kicking ass. And then this is where you kind of get the DC introduction of the multiverse as he breaks it down with the spaghetti. And you learn that not only does if you affect something at a moment in time, it doesn't only affect your future, it also changes the past. So it shows that it
Yeah.
can completely alter the timeline, past the future, and this is where they kind of provide their exposition as to how the multiverse works within the DCU. What are your thoughts on how the multiverse works and time travel's explanation within the DC universe here, Jr.?
Bruce Wayne did a good job of breaking it down because I was confused at first. Of course, I stayed confused. Turning the Speed Force in or whatever, time travel. I didn't get it. And then broke it down to spaghetti made it a lot easier, even though it was spaghetti.
Yeah, yeah, I thought that was a great metaphor, the way that they kind of described it there, and hopefully that continues to play a part in, of course, the future. And we'll touch more on that and how the multiverse plays a part in kind of how this movie, I think, resets things for the future DCU. We'll talk more about that as we get to the close of this movie. But from there, you kind of see he doesn't want to go back into doing things like I talked about. It feels like there's no need for Batman. Gotham's kind of a utopia at this point, and doesn't want to get involved. But what he does do is present day Barry tells 2013 version of Barry, if he doesn't want to help us, we can at least use his bat shit, which I thought was another good joke because, of course, 2013 version of Barry doesn't realize that Bruce Wayne is Batman, and he says bat shit,
Yeah.
and of course he's probably just thinking bat shit, and then of course takes him to the Bat Cave where they discover, the '89 version of the Bat Cave, also very well recreated in this movie. And I would also like to add for people that may have been confused at this part, of course, Michael Keaton's Batman / Bruce Wayne allowed them to discover the Bat Cave, of course, and wanted to eventually get involved as well. As we come to find out, they look up the information that they need, and then that's when we get the reveal of Michael Keaton's Bruce Wayne in the Batman costume
Hey,
with the
did you see his
famous
hair?
line, of course, "I'm Batman," delivered better than any other Batman of all time. Still the greatest Batman of all time.
Yeah, shit. When he came in with the Batman suit, I was like, dang, it looks just like it. He sounded the same too, with a good ass Batman voice, but still Christian Bale though.
All right, so after we get the intro of the greatest Batman ever, as covered there by JR, then we find
No,
out, of course, from Barry.
yeah.
Shut the fuck
Whenever you
up. I'm
hear
not
what
going to
I say,
hear any other
but
opinions, JR.
no, whenever you hear what I say, you'll be like, oh, the greatest. I told him the greatest.
Well, you're wrong if it's not Michael Keaton or Ben Affleck, because
Nah,
that's your top two.
Christian Bale is the number one.
All right. Anyway, moving on to the next part where we find out, of course, Barry Allen looking up on the computer and why Bruce Wayne, Michael Keaton, the greatest Batman ever, has to tune in and help him is because he finds out from looking out in the universe he's currently stuck in that Victor Stone never became Cyborg. He's still playing football there for Gotham University. Arthur Curry actually doesn't exist in this universe. And of course, he tries to look up Wonder Woman and comes to find out she doesn't exist either. So the only one, of course, is Batman. And luckily, Michael Keaton's Batman decides to come in and try and help them. And the one member of the Justice League that he does find that could potentially help them, he thinks is Superman, as he finds a ship that has come in, he believes from Krypton. However, they go to Russia and come to find out it is not indeed Superman. It's not Kal-El. It's actually Kara Zor-El, the cousin of Superman, Supergirl, who has been kept there. Either way, they release her from captivity, and we get a great action scene featuring Batman, Supergirl, and the Flash there, JR. What did you think about that action scene in our introduction to Sasha Cale's Supergirl?
I thought it was dope as hell. I like her suit a lot. Her suit was dope. But I'm laughing because every time you talk to dogs, he get louder.
Yeah, I was wondering, my dog Bentley, he loves to be featured on podcasts.
Yeah, that shit had me geeking with it. It's like he was telling you shut the fuck up every time you was talking.
Well, he doesn't. he doesn't want me to have the spotlight. He doesn't want me to be great.
Nah, but shit, her shit was dope though. I like that fight scene.
I thought it was awesome too. So they free her from captivity. She's kind of neglected to help them at first, but then upon finding out about Zod and him kind of just wiping out humanity, realizes that he's not, the part of Krypton that she wants to support either, decides to help Barry, Bruce, and try and help Earth in this current version of Earth that we're currently stuck in, 2013 version of Barry's version of Earth, I guess, here within the multiverse of the DCU. And I think we get a great battle here. This is where we come in to fight General Zod. We get Faora L, one of the coolest action parts of Man of Steel. General Zod's kind of sidekick, if you would. You also get the huge Kryptonians fighting Bruce Wayne, trying to take them out. Really awesome action scene here. And I thought this was one of the scenes of the movie where they really threw you for a loop. It wasn't what you expected was going to happen here.
Not at all. I expected them to keep going back in time until they defeated him.
Just so basically, this part of the movie kind of throws you for a loop because obviously you're not expecting Supergirl to die. You're not expecting Michael Keaton's Batman to die. And in this initial battle, they do. And of course, we've already seen that the Flash can go back in time. So we feel like no big deal. They're going to go back and reverse it. But they do that a couple times and they die again. And then that's when you kind of realize and remember in your head, you go back to that spaghetti scene with Michael Keaton where he talks about there's certain events that are irreversible. They're incursion events, whatever you want to call them, that no matter what you do, it's going to have the same outcome regardless. And that's one of these events, unfortunately. And our current version of Barry, the main character of this movie, comes to realize that, after 2 or 3 times, that no matter how many times they go back and try and change this, Michael Keaton's Batman's going to die. Sasha Calle's Supergirl's going to die. And 2013's version, 2013's Barry Allen's version of Earth is going to come to an end. General Zod wins in this current reality we're stuck in. And there's nothing they can do to change that. And upon realizing that, our present day version of Barry tries to, tell 2013 version of Barry this. And that's kind of where we realize that 2013 version of Barry is not going to accept this, goes back in time on his own. And that's when we get, the first shard going into the 2013 version of Barry. And you kind of realize, oh, wait a minute, that Dark Flash version that knocked Barry out of the Speed Force into 2013 had those shards in him. And then not long after that, we get that version of what they're calling in this movie Dark Flash popping up, coming back into the Speed Force, and you get the realization that it is 2013 Barry stuck in this loop, been doing this over and over and over and over again. And he's also the one, of course, that knocked Barry out of the Chrono Ball into 2013 to start him on this path where he could hopefully save Michael Keaton's Batman and Sasha Calle's Supergirl, as 2013's version of Barry had fallen in love with Sasha Calle's Supergirl and why he wanted to save them so bad.
I didn't know that was 2013 Barry.
Yeah, and he was unable to accept the fact that that his world was going to end. And it plays into the theme of the movie with our present day Flash, that he has to come to terms and accept the fact that he can't change the fact that his mother died, and the fact that he did is only going to cause problems in the future. He has to. So, which ultimately comes to our resolution that he has to go back in time and take the can of tomatoes back out of the cart. But before we get there, of course, we get the confrontation with Dark Flash, and we get the realization that it's the 2013 version of Barry. Have our little battle there. As the conversation is going on, we realize that the more that 2013 version of Barry, the more the Dark Flash comes back and tries to save Michael Keaton's
Yeah.
Batman and Sasha Calle's Supergirl, the more that time closes in on itself. And we see these different versions of the DC multiverse literally closing in on one another. And we're led to believe that if they all, of course, come together and close in on one another, existence as we know it will cease to exist, of course. And as these universes come in, we get a kind of a zoom in on each one of these universes. And this is, to me, the best part of the movie because I think with a lot of things going on today, you talk about fan service and people want to say, it's all fan service. It doesn't fit. They just threw that in for whatever. And I think that people say that about this movie are wrong because it is literally organically into the plot that these different universes are collapsing on one another.
Yeah.
And the way that they fit it into me, I thought was beautifully done, well done. And I think it's another reason why I'm excited about Andy Muschietti being the director of Batman Brave and the Bold in the future because despite the CGI, negativity of this movie, the spotty CGI that we talked about in the past, I thought some of his
Yeah.
shots and his direction choices and the color palettes that he used in this movie were really beautiful. I think about the shot where the two berries, one has blue lightning, one has yellow, and they come back to back and their feet touch, and you get that beautiful shot. I thought that was very well directed and looked great. And then I think here in this final piece where you get the worlds collapsing in on one another, looked really great, and you get some really good, well done CGI recreations that I think is where a lot of the money of the CGI was spent because you get great recreations of George Reeve, of course, the original TV series Superman, and then you get Christopher Reeve brought back from CGI with Helen Slater, the Supergirl from that time, by his side. You get a Jay Garrick version of the Flash there in CGI. But to me, of course, being the huge Kevin Smith fan that I am, the thing that really brought this movie home to me was you get these Superman lives shot. Nicolas Cage, long hair, as fucking Superman, fighting the giant robotic spider that, of course, John Peters demanded Kevin Smith to include in the third act of the script. And I think that's poetic justice. Kevin Smith brought up recently as well was you actually, of course, get Superman fighting a giant spider in the third act of this film, if you think about it, as this is the third act. That was freaking awesome. So you honor DC film history with Adam West, George Reeves, Christopher Reeve, Helen Slater, Jay Garrick, and then, of course, really go into a deep cut of people, films that were never made in DC film history with Superman Lives probably be the most famous unmade Superman script ever, where you had Nicolas Cage cast as Superman, Tim Burton bringing that, of course.
Batman.
If you're bringing back Michael Keaton's Batman, this '89 incarnation, of course, the Tim Burton version, you got to honor the Tim Burton version of Superman that never was. That probably would have been awesome with Tim Burton directing, Kevin Smith writing the script, and me being a Kevin Smith fan. To me, the movie automatically was no lower than an 8. Spoiler alert for my rating later on. You include Nicolas
Um,
Cage fighting the giant spider in the third act, I'm automatically blown the fuck away. But having said that, JR, this third act where you get our DC cameos, you get Christopher Reeve created from CGI, and some, of course, have maybe thought that was disrespectful to recreate Christopher Reeve from CGI and George Reeves after they have passed. And I understand that, viewpoint, but to me, I thought they really did a cool job honoring DC film lore. And I thought that's all they were trying to do. And I thought that it was well done. And of course, like I said, bringing in Nick Cage, the Kevin Smith nod, John Peters, Tim Burton, the Superman Lives. Shout out to John Schnepp and the great documentary of the death of Superman Lives. DC fans, of course, know that one. But what were your thoughts when these awesome cameos popped up in this really well done third act that, of course, provided fan service, but I thought provided it organically, JR? But what did you think?
I thought it was double shit. That's what made me like the movie even more.
100%. 100% agree with you right there. Thought that it was the best part of the movie for me. I know we talked a little bit earlier, the movie started out slow. And if the first 15, 20 minutes of the movie were slow, I think the last 30 minutes of the movie more than made up for it in one of my favorite third acts in
100%.
all of the DCEU, to this point, I guess you could say. But having said that, finally, battles that off. The worlds don't collide. Things don't cease to exist as we know it. Our current version of Barry learns that he has to go back, put the can of tomatoes back on the shelf. You get the emotional scene between, Barry and his mother within the Speed Force. Barry gets to talk to her a little bit. And I thought that this final scene was just really well done. Of course, not the first time I shed tears in the movie, but I definitely did share maybe the most tears at this moment. What did you think about the scene right here where Barry had to go back and, put the can of tomatoes back on the shelf, effectively killing his mother? And the only time he gets a chance to talk to her, of course, is in the Speed Force when she doesn't know that he's speaking and doesn't really get a chance to recognize him. Although we get the feeling that being a mother as she is, she kind of recognizes him a little bit.
Yeah. Oh, this shit made me tear up like a motherfucker. I don't usually tear up that movie, but I was damn for that.
Yeah. Amazingly done. I thought just a really well done scene. If the, of course, cameo scene, the fan service scene, if you want to call it that, wasn't your favorite, then I think that this one was definitely the scene that emotionally hit the hardest. I thought it was really well done. Love that for kind of a little bit of a conclusion to the movie. But then we thought things were done, and we had seen throughout this movie that video security footage that Barry Allen's father had never shown his face, and that's why he couldn't be acquitted of the murder. And the main reason that being was because of the canned tomatoes that he was purchasing was on the bottom shelf, and he was wearing a hat facing forward. Barry kind of looks up at the camera thereafter, of course, putting the can of tomatoes back on the shelf, following the scene with his mother, realizes that and decides to quickly, of course, within the Speed Force, move the can of tomatoes to the top shelf. So one of the final scenes of the movie would get Barry Allen's father acquitted because of Barry Allen's decision to move the can of tomatoes to the top shelf. So his father looks up, his face is spotted on the camera, doesn't get convicted of the mother's murder, which awesome happy ending for the movie, right? Is that, it's great stuff right there, JR.
Yeah, it is a facility. See, he talks to her afterwards.
However, we know from what Michael Keaton's Bruce Wayne has told us from our knowledge of time travel in general, you can't just fuck with the past like that and not expect it to have consequences.
Yeah.
So our final scene of the movie, kind of the payoff scene, the coda, I guess, of the movie, you can call it. We get Barry Allen on the phone with Bruce Wayne, and from the voice, you can realize it doesn't sound really like Ben Affleck. Maybe it's Michael Keaton. But the car pulls up. Yeah, you don't really know. The car pulls up. It's the fancy sports car. You see the leg pop out of the sports car in the suit. It's obviously a Bruce Wayne. And then we get the reveal of who the Bruce Wayne is. And because Barry fucked with the tomatoes to get his father acquitted, Barry Allen, this version of the Flash, Ezra Miller, they are no longer in our current timeline. They are in a different timeline where Bruce Wayne / Batman is none other than
George Clooney, Mr. Batman.
George Clooney, the only one from Batman to Robin. And I thought that was fucking hilarious when I was in the theater on opening night. Obviously, this was the biggest laugh of the movie. And you get Barry Allen's previously super glued tooth falling out, and you get the lone F-bomb that they're allowed in a PG-13 movie. He says, "Who the fuck is this guy?" When he sees George Bruce Wayne. So I thought that was great. That was well done.
Yeah, that was funny.
And so I think, to me, it works on multiple levels as well. It shows that this version of the Flash is not in the current DCU, so that the Flash can be recast in James Gunn's DCU, obviously, which will be starting with Superman Legacy. And we'll talk more about the casting news on that in a future video here on JC's Pop Culture channel. But it also kind of, I thought, was cool because in a way it shows that this version of Barry Allen, the Flash, and how he went back and fucked with the timeline is the reason why the Batman from the original Batman, quadrilogy, where we saw it go from Michael Keaton to Val Kilmer to George Clooney, is the reason why that changed, and maybe fans, didn't even pick up on that, and why the version of, because to me it just shows that he's in that same Michael Keaton Batman universe, but now it's George Clooney.
Yeah.
So from the time, of him fucking with the timeline, it's went from Michael Keaton to Val Kilmer to George Clooney. So not only does it help for the future of the DCU and, provide James Gunn a way to reboot the Flash, as this Flash isn't in the current timeline, obviously, it also almost provides a backdoor for DC and Warner Brothers to be like, oh, that's why the Batman and Bruce Wayne was different over our original quadrilogy, is Ezra Miller's Flash was fucking with the timeline.
Yeah.
And I thought that was pretty cool. And I love the fact of getting George Clooney back and giving him a chance to redeem himself. Obviously, the worst Batman movie ever. We can all agree. But
Yeah.
having said that, though, JR, The Flash 2023 obviously didn't do well at the box office. The spotty CGI, of course, has been pointed to as a reason. The Ezra Miller boycotts, I think, is the main reason, if you're asking me personally. But all in all, tell me your positives from this movie, your negatives from this movie, and then give me your overall score on a scale of 1 to 10.
The positives was about the last like 45 minutes of the movie. All that. All right. The negatives was by the first 20 minutes, 30 minutes, probably honestly. Up until they gave him that ring, I thought it was corny. Then we got that when he got the ring, that's when I started fucking with it. So up until then, I just thought it was real slow. It wasn't making sense to me. It was corny. I
Don't
felt like
disagree.
it was
Don't disagree.
the score I give it 7.5.
So
Yeah,
how
it's
do you
good.
feel how it wraps up the DCEU and kind of leads into James Gunn DCU, and how do you feel about that moving forward? And of course, Andy Muschietti, director of this movie, will be directing Batman: Brave and the Bold, James Gunn DCU movie, and you being the bigger Batman fan of the two, of course, I'm the big Superman fan, as you obviously see behind me there. How do you feel about Andy Muschietti, his abilities as a director, and him, moving forward in the DCU, carrying on to be the director of Batman: Brave and the Bold, featuring Bruce Wayne and Damian Wayne?
Well, if James Gunn does anything like he did with Guardians of the Galaxy, no universe, then I think we could get in. Uh, I mean, shit, the movie was, I thought it was directed well, it just CGI didn't sit well. So, I
Yeah,
mean, he ain't no Christopher Nolan and no shit, you know what I mean? But I'll take it.
yeah. I mean, I agree with you, and like I said earlier, I think that CGI was spotty. I completely understand people's complaints that have complaints with the CGI of this movie. And in Andy Muschietti's defense, he's come out and said that it was purposeful. And like I said, whether that's to defend, his FX team or whatever, I completely believe that he originally set out for the effects, the CGI in the Speed Force to look slightly different than it does in real time to kind of,
Yeah,
provide a variation there. But I also believe that the effects in the Speed Force didn't pan out the way that he probably initially hoped that they would. And maybe that's on Warner Brothers. I don't know. Especially when you're talking about the fact that this is a movie that kind of isn't going anywhere. There's not going to be, a sequel, and they
it's like,
know that
you
James
know,
Gunn's taken over, and this is kind of the last hoorah, if you will, of the DCEU, for lack of a better term. So they probably didn't want to put the money into the effects. So I don't blame, Warner Brothers on that end either. However, that of course is a knock against the movie. And if it wasn't for that, to me, this may be, a 9.5, 10 type movie. I fucking love
yeah,
this movie, man.
it's,
I enjoyed the shit out of it, especially being a fan of, Michael Keaton's Batman from '89. Just getting to see, him come back. All those, some of those lines felt a little spoon fed, force fed. You get the, you want to get nuts, let's get nuts line back. And then, of course, the Batman line had to get that back. And those, maybe felt a little force fed, but getting to see his Batman perform with the capabilities of CGI was awesome. Getting to see those action scenes, I thought that was great. And of course, I would love to see, what happened with that Batgirl movie that we'll never get to see just because of Michael Keaton. Um, who knows? Maybe one day enough fans will push for that and they'll release that, on streaming or something one day. But having said that, because of the spotty CGI, some other things within the film that I thought felt a little square peg round hole. I'm going 8.5, but I think it's definitely a movie that if you're a DC fan in general, especially if you've been a fan of DC films since they began with Christopher Reeve, Superman is a movie you should watch. If you're a comic book fan, superhero fan, it's a movie you should watch. If you're a fan of Zack Snyder's DCEU, it's a movie you should watch. And I know it's getting panned because of the bad CGI. It's getting terrible, numbers monetarily because of boycotts against Ezra Miller and et cetera, all those things. All in all, it's a very enjoyable movie. I think if you're a comic book fan, superhero fan, and especially a DC fan.
Yeah, that's definitely.
Yeah,
Right.
100%. So we're recording this, about a week ahead of the time it's releasing on VOD. So once it comes out on, July 18th, VOD, check it out if you didn't get a chance to check it out in theaters. Although I hope you get a chance to check it out there. But having said that, that is our review for the Flash 2023. You're catching this on the audio side. It's on Two Dudes Review. And if you are doing that, I do encourage you, hop over to the YouTube side, subscribe to JC's Pop Culture. Going to be a ton of movie reviews, movie news, video game news, etc. hopping up there. And if you're a fan of the CRW, I'm going to try and post this on our social media and on the social feed on our YouTube channel there as well. Of course, where I cover WVU. Be sure hop over here and subscribe as well. It will really help me out. And if you're a fan of movies and TV shows and stuff, it'll be fun for you. But having said that, JR, any final thoughts on the Flash 2023 and I guess kind of what we can call the swan song for Zack Snyder's what could have been amazing DCU? And I think the one final thing I'll say before I pass it off to you and pass that mic is that Zack Snyder's Justice League, perfect comic book film to me, and just a picture of what could have been. But having said that, JR, final thoughts on the Flash and the conclusion of Zack Snyder's DCEU, I guess, and the movement into the DCU and James Gunn.
It's just like Warner Brothers really put the fuck on us. When I say us, I mean fans. Because Zack Snyder had this shit all planned out perfectly, and then they started fucking with it. And once they fucked with it, there was another thing. Remember, it's good, and the only good thing about it was Justice League for real. But the Flash, I ain't got really too much to say about it other than I said the last 45 minutes, that shit was dope as fuck. But other than that, yeah, it could have been better, but still good as fuck. I gave it a 7.5, so it wasn't too bad for me. Just in the game, but the end made up for it.
Yeah, 7.5, still a great rating. Like I said, with all the problems involved, with the outside problems involved as well, I think it was still an enjoyable movie, which I guess is one of the best things you can say. But having said that, I really am glad to feature a DC movie review as the first video here on the JC's Pop Culture channel. Stay tuned here. Going to have plenty more movie news in the near future. But if you're a DC fan, definitely subscribe here. I'm going to go back. I want to review every DC movie ever made, of course, across the near future here in the channel. Look out for a video coming soon on the casting news of Superman Legacy. Have several announcements on that and James Gunn's future of the DCU. For now, JR gives The Flash 2023, directed by Andy Muschietti, a 7.5. I give it an 8.5. Think it's an enjoyable time. Check it out if you're a fan of superhero movies, and especially if you're a fan of DC. Having said that, I'm JC, and for JR, until next time, we'll see you at the movies.